Welcome back to the Behind the Well show. Your host, Roger Abel, joined by Elias Randel. Eli.
Yeah.
You excited for the NCAA tournament?
Yes.
Are you more excited for the girls or the boys?
For the girls, because the Iowa Hawkeyes are playing in it, and that's who I'm going to cheer for. And that's who I'm picking to win the championship.
Ooh, that's out there, dude. And by the time...
It's not out there. They're a number one seed.
By the time people actually hear this podcast, we're doing this a few days before the tournament.
They'll be eliminated.
They'll be eliminated. I don't know, man. I think we have a fun team to watch. I don't know if we've got the juice to win it all, but
well,
that's not for me to determine.
They're going to find out.
So the reason I asked that, have you actually watched the Iowa State boys?
No. I've watched maybe 10 quarters of basketball this year. I'm not much of a basketball watcher.
They're actually a lot of fun. I think they can make a run at it.
I'm going to watch their games.
Are we going to watch together?
I don't know. I don't know what your schedule is compared to mine. I don't know if we can.
6:35 Thursday night. I got a babysitter.
Oh, well, maybe. No, I'll be at home watching it. Family
Get a babysitter.
Time. Okay.
All right, good.
I'll drop my kids off at your house. Sounds like
we've got
a babysitter coming over.
We've got one. So another thing I want to talk to you about, I read an article, this on CNBC, and it's about money dysmorphia. And people doesn't know what dysmorphia is, which I didn't until I read this article. It's basically just keeping up with the Joneses, comparing yourself to people. And I just got back from Miami, and I feel like that is the ultimate place where your people are constantly comparing themselves to others. And in this article, it says that 41% of Gen Zs and millennials compare themselves to others and feel like they're behind. And I think as I read this, I just start to think about how the younger generation engages with social media and what they watch. It's all TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, and none of those things are bad. Instagram. But you only see these small little snippets of your friends who take a vacation once every 3 years, and you're like, man, I should be on the expensive vacation.
Yeah, of course you should.
Do you have friends you know that do that?
So,
like, I don't have any like habitual offenders that I really know in my friend group that do that. I feel like it's a younger generation thing, actually.
Well, maybe, I don't know. When I read this, I thought, wow, money dysmorphia. I'd rather just say keeping up with the Joneses. Money dysmorphia sounds scary to me, but...
Is that too big of a word for you?
Yeah, that word is... I'd rather say keeping up with the Joneses. That's more in my wheelhouse of how I like to think. But
Elias, I think all of our listeners would rather have us say keeping up with the Joneses than dysmorphia.
Yeah, I'd just assume never hear that word again. But... Back to your point, a couple things. I thought you just made a good point about Miami. I think culturally, Miami's much different than the Midwest where we live. I don't think the keeping up with the it exists everywhere, but like on a spectrum, I don't think it's that bad in the Midwest. And there's a lot of millionaire next door type people around us, and I would say, I think I probably do have some friends that I think keeping up with the Joneses is more important to them than it is to me. For me, that's never really been a thing for me. But when I was younger and working in high school, I worked on a farm, and for a guy who was a farmer and a successful businessman, and that was I remember one of the first things he taught me as a young person was he said, if you really want to be successful, don't compare yourself to other people, and don't try and keep up with the Joneses, because that's one way you're going to derail yourself. So I think I was lucky to hear that advice early on from someone that I valued their opinion, right? Like someone can tell you that, but if you don't care about their opinion, it doesn't matter.
100% agree. I think too, here in the Midwest, keeping up with the Joneses is like getting a new house or an SUV. Where keeping up with the Joneses in Miami is getting a super yacht or a Lamborghini or something just far more ostentatious. So
ostentatious, nice.
That's not that big of a word. Maybe too big for me. But my wife went to the design district, and I actually had a good time. She wanted to just do some shopping, and I'm not really into that. So I grabbed a coffee. I talked to you I was talking to you the whole time while I was drinking my coffee, like 2 hours.
Yeah, and there was like a bunch of Rolls Royces, or what was it?
It was like the greatest car show on earth. I mean, they were
You're just on a bench.
I was just sitting on a bench, and I happened to be right by the valet. So all the nice cars are pulling up to the valet booth to get parked so they could go shopping. I saw 5 Rolls-Royce Cullens all on the same street, like $500,000 each. I don't know how many Lamborghinis, and I saw a Tesla Cybertruck. So it was pretty cool, but all I'm thinking is, number one, these people have a lot of money. But when I read the article, I'm like, if you were trying to keep up with the Joneses there, it's extremely difficult. Where here,
be knocking it down.
Well, once again, here, how many Cybertrucks have you seen in Cedar Rapids or anywhere in Iowa?
I don't think I've seen one in person.
How many Lamborghinis have you seen around town? How many Ferrari? You don't see them. Down there, it's
rarely.
All the time.
A lot of I am starting to see more and more Teslas.
Well, you know why? They're used.
The ones around here?
I'm sure. They're a couple years old. People get a little bit better price on them. And the other thing is they're becoming more readily available. There's more in production. But I'm sure a lot of it is, you see these cars, a lot of them are 1, 2, 3 years old, right? Because people don't want to go buy a brand new car all the time.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, at least around us, I think the people that can afford stuff like that, I don't know that they try to flaunt it in town because there's just not enough people, right? Like if it was like Miami where there's thousands of Ferraris, you'd probably see them. But I think around here, like in our community, even people that can afford it, I don't think they're going to drive around just because of a Midwest culture where like they don't want to flaunt their wealth.
So I don't know if this is true or not, but this is a story I heard about 15 years ago. So I happen to be friends with quite a few Edward Jones guys. And there was an Edward Jones guy down in a really small town in Missouri, but was one of the biggest producers with the company. And like 25 miles outside of town, he had a farm with a barn, and it was all loaded with like classic cars, exotic cars, but he would only go there and drive them out of town. So nobody in the small little town knew he had them.
Yeah, he probably goes to his meetings in a Camry or, he drives something practical.
And then he went and got his
But
fleet.
that's like a pretty Midwestern thing to do.
So I just thought that was interesting. It is top of mind for me because I just got back from Miami. And I was in Marco Island, which interesting about Marco Island, even the drive down there, I didn't see nearly as many, exotic cars. And I was down there for a week, but Miami was everywhere. We thought today would be a good day to just hit some listener questions. We had a couple come in over the last couple of weeks, and we had Molly put together some listener questions. And Elias, I think the first one is actually a really good one that we can help people prepare for when they're meeting with advisors. But I'll just read it, and I'll take your take. I'll give my take. But the question's from Brian. Brian asked Elias, what should I be asking my financial advisor in our annual meetings? Is there anything I can do to prepare to get more out of that time with the advisor?
I think so. I think some of the most valuable time spent, and if you can start to think about, well, what is important to me? What are my goals? And then I also think if you have something that is on your mind, like what I really like and appreciate is when people let us know what their real concerns are, because then there's a solution for that, right? And we can be proactive with preparation, but how do I know what Roger wants to talk about unless Roger's honest with me about what he wants to talk about and what's been on his mind recently? So I think the approach I appreciate is just being very upfront and honest about it. And then I also think understanding that the feedback is most likely very true, right? I mean, I can only speak for us, but I know we tell people the truth about their situation, what they need to hear. So as long as you're, open-minded and comfortable with the answer you're going to hear, you should be open about the things that are on your mind and that you want to talk about.
Yeah, I have a couple takeaways just because I've done this, 20 plus years. 20 years ago, people weren't logging onto the computer. Right? I mean, going to checking your statement and your balance every day didn't exist. Like you had to wait for your statement. So, if even 10 years ago, the adoption of people utilizing online services to view their investments has rapidly expanded, and most companies are pushing you that way. So 15 years ago, a lot of people were coming in to find out how they were doing, right? How am I doing against the stock market? Am I making money? So a lot of that meeting would revolve around progress. Today, everybody knows how they're doing. So if you're going to meet with your advisor so they can tell you how much or how little money you made, there's not a whole lot of value in that anymore. I think now one of the things you should be looking to do in that review meetings is, if you've done a plan, focus on what's the progress of my plan versus the progress of my annual year-to-date return or 5-year rolling return. What's the progress of the plan? Because that's the end game. What you did in the last 12 months or what you do in the next 12 months or the last 3 years, it has very little to do with the end game and your financial plan. So I think you should be focusing on, how do we update the financial plan if I have other concerns? That's first. Second, like you said, just having your questions written down on paper. Don't try to remember them. I can tell you the individuals that come to meetings with me and have a list of questions ready, or send me a pre-meeting email and say, hey, these are the things I want to talk about. Those are usually pretty good meetings. And we get to have collaboration together and talk through different scenarios. And it's funny, I had a meeting with one of, actually, they're one of my favorite clients, and you work with them too. And she came in and said, Roger, I'm not sure if you'll be able to answer all these, but I think Elias will, because she kind of knows our role in the company at some point. Yeah. And, I got to spend time and talk through all the questions versus her just calling you with the questions she thought you could answer and me doing the ones she thought I could answer. So being prepared is probably one of the best things you can do. And when you go to the meeting, just have this idea, what's my goal? What am I trying to get out of this meeting? Because it's just to find out what my percentage rate of return is. Well, just log onto the computer and check it out, and
you can check
have
the
a quick
app
call.
for that.
Yeah. So that's what I think is really rapidly changed over the last 10 to 15 years. And I think about 15 years because last night our radio show had our 15-year anniversary. Been doing that live on WMT radio for 15 years. And it gave me time to reflect on what's changed in the industry and how we do things. And I think the biggest thing that's changed is the financial planning tool and the capabilities we have become kind of this living, breathing part of people's life versus just, hey, here's a stack of paper that tells you where you are now. We'll update this in 5 years. We're updating it constantly. I have some individuals coming in this afternoon, and they're in their 40s, but they want to retire at 55. They want to see what their progress is. So we're just going to cover their financial plan. We don't even have a review to talk about how they're doing. The whole meeting is about, hey, how do we get to where we want to go? And that's a meaningful meeting for them.
Yeah, it is. It is meaningful, and it's and that's really what people, at least my opinion, that's really what people want. They want, they really just want advice on what to do. Like, how do I actually make this work? And the more honest you can be, I just think the more value as a customer or client that you're going to get from the relationship.
Are you ready to take control of your financial future? The financial professionals at Premier Investments and Wealth Management are the guides you've been looking for. Picture this: a financial plan tailored exclusively to you. Our team of experienced professionals will work closely with you to understand your aspirations and develop a personalized roadmap to get you there. Whether you're dreaming of retirement, buying a new home, or sending your kids to college, we've got the tools to give you confidence in your financial life. We'll help you navigate saving and investing, retirement income, and tax strategies. Our job is not just about making money. It's about helping our clients make smart choices. We'll provide you with the tools and knowledge to confidently steer your financial ship toward a brighter future. Are you ready to embark on your financial journey with confidence? Visit www.btwealthshow.com or click the link in the description of this podcast. Your financial future awaits.
Joe had the next question, Elias. I'm curious, what is the best way to split up my paycheck? How much should go into bank savings versus expenses versus investments? I'm 45, make $160,000 a year, but I don't really have anything to show for it. And here's what I'm going to tell Joe. Number one, you need to get an idea of where your money's going. I mean, that's the first thing. If you're making $160,000 and you have nothing to show for it, let's actually figure out where it's going. Is it going to car payments? Is it going to food? Is it going to Starbucks? Where's it going? Easiest way to do that, Quicken. Download your bank transactions for the last year. It will tell you where every dime went, and you will be very, very surprised as to where it went. Most people think big purchases are why they don't have any money. It's not. It's $5 at a time. $10
it's all the
at a
little
time.
stuff that
adds up. You know, most people are very conscious about a large purchase.
You think about it a lot more than you do the day-to-day ones.
Nobody thinks about it when you go to the gas pump, swipe your card for $60 for the gas, and you run inside and grab a bag of Cheetos, a pop, a slice of pizza, and that's another $9.
Is that comment directed at me or something? Or
I know you were hiding pizza from your wife at one time.
Hiding, yeah.
No, I'm joking. I used to always get pizza. I don't anymore. But that's the first thing. Figure out where it's going. And then really after that, you need to sit down and say, hey, how much debt do I have? Let's knock that out. Get an emergency fund and start paying ourselves first. And that's how you're going to get something accumulated.
It is. And I think you're going to have to wrap your mind around the reality. If this is the situation, 45 and not much to show, you're also, in addition to those things, you're going to have to figure out how to have a high contribution rate. Like you're going to have to figure out how to get 20 to 30% of your income saved if you want to have some money over the next 15 to 20 years.
Yeah, I mean,
it's going to be harder to achieve.
Or he's just going to have to work a little bit longer.
Right.
Like
but
realistically,
you're going to have to understand both of those things.
If you're 45 and you think you're retiring at 60, you don't have anything saved, it's not going to happen. I mean, you're going to have to save a massive amount of money, which clearly...
Can you save $50,000 a year? But with these spending habits, you probably
not. But it starts slow, right? It starts, hey,
yeah.
First thing to do, just set up a account that you're making regular and consistent contributions to. If I were Joe, how I would back into this to figure out how much I need to put into investments, that was part of Joe's question. I'd actually run a financial plan and say, okay, if my goal is to retire at 65, what does my contribution rate have to be? And I'd probably set up my budget around my contribution rate. And that's going to be super painful for most people, because if I do that, I'm going to pay myself first. And it might mean selling a car, moving to a different house, but if you want to retire, that might be what it takes. So financial plan to figure out contribution rate, everything else will kind of fall in line after that.
Yeah, I agree with that. Should we go to the next question here?
Yeah, hammer it.
All right, so Ryan, he's 35 now. Early in his 20s, he opened a non-retirement account and thought he was opening a Roth IRA. So he's been putting money into a non-retirement investment account. Would it make sense to pull money from that account to max out the Roth IRA every year, or should I just leave the funds where they are? It's a good question. Probably a two-part answer. Right?
Yeah,
It's a two-parter.
So I'll tackle it. It depends.
Yeah.
The first question for Ryan is, can you max out that Roth IRA with your current money or contributions going forward? Because if you can, then there's no reason to use the money you've already saved
to just put it in a different type of account.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense.
I agree with
so
that.
If Ryan says, hey, I can go put the $587 a month away to max out my Roth IRA, that's what I would do. I wouldn't move the money. If you can't do that, though, then I would move money from that brokerage account into the Roth and make sure I'm getting it maxed out. But I wouldn't not contribute because I have this other money, because then you're just not saving more. I think that's the easy answer to it. And realize, Ryan, if you do it, there may be some tax consequence of selling the investments in that brokerage account. But the ability to have Roth-free or Roth contributions and tax-free growth for the next arguably 30 years of your working career is pretty powerful.
It is. I don't think there's many people out there that have a lot of money in a Roth and a lot of money in a non-retirement account, and they're upset with that situation. So it's good to have both.
I'm yet to have anybody complain because they had too much tax-free money.
Yeah,
I don't know, maybe
you don't
you
hear
have.
complaints about that.
There's 2 complaints I don't get, Elias. I save too much. I have too much money that's tax-free.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, you'll never hear that.
Elias, Nancy sent the next one. I'm 45, just laid off. I have an old 401k from an employer that has about $8,000 in it. Would it make sense to cash it out to live on until I can find another job? What do you think? Because we get this a lot.
No, that doesn't make sense. Here's the thing: if you absolutely have to, you have to. But I just don't. Taking money out of long-term savings account, I don't know how that helps people.
It's absolute last resort. I know people look at it and say, hey, it's not a big amount of money. But what if that $8,000 turned into $32,000? That's meaningful now, right?
It is meaningful.
It is.
Yeah.
And guess what that is? That's probably 15 or 20 years of growth.
Yeah. And how many?
Rule of 72. Take 72 divided by the interest rate. That's how often your money doubles. So if you make 7.2% every year, which we know it's not going to make that exactly every year, she'd have 2 doubles. This would be $32,000 when she's 65.
Yeah, I agree. I do agree with that. And I mean, even good savers. I mean, because I know people that have been good savers for a long time. I mean, at one time they took money from the 401k to. Could be a down payment on a house or something, but you just start looking at the kind of the long-term opportunity cost, and it's hard to come up with a scenario where it's worth doing that.
I think another thing to recognize is it's not going to be $8,000 that she gets. It's going to be something less.
Yeah, you're
probably
gonna pay
25% less. I mean, if you're laid off, you don't have a job, you're not going to pay much in tax. I also think, though, like today's economy makes it easier to not have to spend this money. I'm confident Nancy could probably go find some part-time work in the gig economy, whether it's like Uber or something out there, to get her by until she gets a regular job. Whether she wants to do that or not, I don't know. But I feel like it's been made so easy to make money in the gig economy that, when someone says I have to cash in an $8,000 account, well, what are you doing? Like, you can deliver pizzas and make enough money to just squeak by. I mean, I know it's not a full-time job, but it's probably enough to not have you cash this out.
Yeah, there's always, if you want to work, there's always you can find something somewhere. There's always something you can do.
Hey, the next one's from Matt. Matt asks, my wife and I are maxing out Roth IRAs. I am close to maxing out my 401k. My wife runs her own small business. Should we open a solo 401k for her, or should we start saving money in a taxable account? What do you think?
Well,
I wish I knew their age.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of the information. It's a depend answer. It depends on your goals, and if a non-retirement account fits and is going to help you with your goals, I would really consider that. I think I would look through that lens. Is this going to fit what I want to do? And if you don't have a place for a non-retirement account and what you want to accomplish, I don't see what the issue would be with opening a solo 401k for a small business.
You hit it on the head. It all goes back to, what are your goals? And here's why. If you were to tell me this couple's 35 years old and we plan on retiring at 54, maybe there's some argument to be made for having a taxable account so you can kind of bridge that gap between 55 and 59 and a half without having to do a 72T or some other, cumbersome way to get the money out pre 59 and a half. That said, if they're young, they're giving up so much tax advantage by not doing either the traditional 401k or Roth 401k for her. It's really hard, because even if they did a Roth 401k, Elias, they can always take the basis out before 59 and a half. So
right, and that is something to think about with Roth accounts.
There would really be no reason to not be maxing out that Roth 401k, because you still can take all those contributions out before 59 and a half with no tax, no interest, no penalty. So in that case, I think you'd have to have, like you said, a reason for that account. Are you saving for a goal that you're going to buy in 10 years? that you just want to have the liquidity of that account. For me, my non-retirement account is my emergency fund. I have enough money in there that I can weather any storm, so it doesn't really matter. So I just want it to be invested versus sitting in the bank. Sitting in the bank's a little easier today when you're getting 4 and 5% of money markets, but there has to be a goal to it. I think likely if you are like most individuals who are owning a small business, opening up a solo 401k and utilizing the Roth portion of it would be exactly like setting up a non-retirement account. From a contribution standpoint, it's both after-tax dollars. Why wouldn't you go get the Roth benefit and still have access to the contributions if you needed it? It's really the only reason non-retirement would be is it'd be just liquidity at that point. So that was a good question, though. I had to think about that one. The last question we have, it's actually from Kyle. I'm about 5 years from retirement. I switched my 401k contributions to Roth a few years ago when my company introduced it. When I log into my 401k, it shows 3 sections of money: traditional 401k, Roth 401k, and employer match. If I roll my 401k at retirement, do I get to pick if the match goes to Roth or traditional?
That's a good question. It's going to end up, for ease of conversation, it's just going to end up going however that money's currently invested. So if it's a pre-tax, the company's putting it in pre-tax, you're going to want to keep it with your pre-tax.
Which up until Secure Act 2.0 passed, it was all pre-tax. The employer always matched the pre-tax portion.
Yeah.
It was an option.
If they're matching, if they will match as a Roth, which I would say that's not a lot of companies have adopted that within their 401k plan, then that'll just stay with your Roth accounts. I'm sure, and I don't know if there's an option to maybe do a conversion or something like that, but that gets a little complicated.
Yeah, I would say it's likely that employer portion is going pre-tax because that's how it's been up until basically a year ago. I don't know any employers who are matching to the Roth portion yet. So I think, like you said, for easier conversation, that's going to go to the pre-tax portion. Last thing we're talking about, our last segment, Elias, is 2024. We've coined the year of personalized advice. And on every show, we're going to take one piece of advice and kind of challenge that blanket advice and talk about the reasons that maybe it doesn't make sense for everybody. This week, we are going to talk about saving goals based on age. And I think that this goes back to what we talked about early in the show. Everybody wants to compare themselves to others. We've heard this. Well, how am I doing compared to others? It really doesn't matter, okay? And most of the people that look to have a savings goal based on age have never done a financial plan. And there's this rule of thumb out there that has an example, and there's a graphic if you're watching the video. Some will say that you should have 1 times your annual income saved by 30, 6 times your annual income saved by 50, et cetera, et cetera. And when you're 67, you should have 10 times your annual income. Okay? Here's the problem with that. It doesn't take into account any of your spending habits. It doesn't take into account your goals, your desires, what you want to do. Do you want to travel?
I think the other thing that doesn't factor in too is like how your salary changes over the years.
Well, you have to keep moving the goalpost.
Well, right. But let's say, if you switch careers when you're like in your almost 40 and you end up between 40 and 50, you increase your income way more than you did from 25 to 35. Like the math might not even be you could still be on track for your goals, but at 55 to have 7 times your income, it depends on what you're making at that time.
I don't know anybody who's serious about their money that does their savings goal this way. Like I know people who have a number goal, and
this could work easily if you just basically have the same. Like if your income level just stays the same forever, that's maybe a decent way to look at it. But if your income changes over time, I don't know how.
It's like the individuals who say, I want to have X amount accumulated when I retire. And there's 2 people that tell me that. The people that just want to have that number with no rationale behind it. Then the engineers that I work with that have run a spreadsheet and said, hey, the way I figure this with my complicated spreadsheet, which nothing wrong with that, I actually appreciate because I put some work into it. I need to have 2.8 million at this time because this should satisfy me. And they're coming to me to do what? Validate
The work.
their spreadsheet. Yeah. And I appreciate that. But this right here is just saying, well, you made X, this is what you're going to need. Well, what if somebody has made $400,000, donated half their salary because they're super charitable and live on like $20,000 a year? Why is it relevant that they get $4 million accumulated? Like, it's all, your retirement shall be based upon your goals, your priorities, and what's in concert with your values and all those different things, not a chart told me, hey, at this age, you should have X saved.
Yeah, when I first looked at this, because it says save X, meaning multiply your starting salary. When I first looked at this, I was like, well, I'm pretty sure my first job I was getting paid minimum wage.
But all they're
so
saying,
that should be pretty easy to accomplish.
But all this is saying, though, at age 30, if you're making $50,000, you should have $50,000 saved. So I actually think the one thing about this, if you did say, hey, at age 30, I need to have one time my salary saved, you'd be starting off on the right foot. Because if you're making $40,000 and you had 40,000 saved, you got out of the chute. Then at 35, it's 2 times. So if you're making $60,000, you got 120. And at 40, if you're making $70,000, you got to have 210. Like, it keeps moving the goalpost at least.
Which there's value in that.
I think there's very little value on how much you have saved at 67. If I was going to take something from this, Elias, I'd look and say, hey, if I'm a 25-year-old, my goal should be by age 30 to have 1 times my salary.
Yeah, that's a good goal. If
Because
you had 1 times your salary saved, and
all it means is they established good saving habits. The older you get, the more important. It's not your saving habits are important, but your spending habits become more important than what you're saving the older you get. Because if you go into retirement, I've said this for a long time, you don't get to make a money mistake in retirement. You don't. Like, you're retired, so your earning potential is significantly lower. Typically, if you were making $200,000 at a job and you retire and you make a money mistake, you don't get to go back and get a $200,000 job, right?
typically not.
We know where they work. They work at places that are easy jobs, and you've been out of the workforce. Unfortunately, it's not easy to go back and get those jobs. So your spending habits become much more important later in life. Not that they're not important early, but once you hit retirement, you have to have a really good grasp on how you're spending money. I want to thank everybody for listening to the show. I thought it was a great one today. If you haven't done so, please follow us on social media. We're on X, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. I guess that's X now. And if you haven't started 2024 off in what I would call the right way, get a personalized one-page Premier Vision document. You can click the link in the description or go to btwellshow.com. We'd love to get you started and get you going on the right track to your retirement goals. You have anything else to say today, Elias?
Yeah, thank you for listening. We'll see you next time.